Bette Davis was born in 1908 in Lowell, Massachusetts, a bustling mill town known for its industrial history and for fostering a certain brand of grit in those who grew up there. The modest pink Victorian house where she was born still stands, subdivided into multiple residences, but bearing a discreet plaque that honors the future star's earliest days. Though she moved from that home as an infant, its memory lingered like a gentle echo throughout her life, proof that even icons start from humble beginnings. Picture the house in those early 1900s, tall windows letting in the crisp New England air, a wraparound porch creaking underfoot, and a swirl of horse-drawn carriages and the occasional automobile rumbling past. That environment no doubt helped shape a strong-willed young girl who would one day become legendary for her unwavering resolve and razor-sharp wit. Even from the start, there was an understanding in Bette Davis that success belonged to those who met life head-on, no matter the obstacles. Her move into acting began on the stage, not the screen. Long before the Academy Awards and the epic Hollywood feuds, Davis was finding her voice in theatrical productions that tested her emotional range. She had a remarkable ability to vanish into a character. There's a story that during one of her earliest performances, a moment of stage fright transformed into a wildly improvised flourish that left the audience clamoring for more, an early sign of her daring spontaneity. Here was a performer who might stumble, but would always catch herself with a flourish and own it, a trademark that would come to define her screen persona. Stage life taught her to project her voice so it reached the last row and to modulate her expressions for dramatic effect. That invaluable training laid the groundwork for her transition into Hollywood's then new world of talkies, the synchronized sound films that revolutionized the industry in the early 1930s. When she arrived in Hollywood in December 1930, Davis came armed with raw talent and an almost frightening level of ambition. She shared modest quarters with her mother Ruthie and their beloved dog Jim, while she navigated an often fickle system that was still getting used to the demands of sound cinema. In those days, the studios doled out roles with assembly line efficiency, and actors were often treated like commodities rather than artists. Yet Davis, with her unyielding spirit, quickly proved she was no ordinary contract player. Her film debut in Bad Sister, 1931, wasn't exactly a sensation, but it introduced her to an industry that soon realized her power to enthrall audiences. By 1932, she and her family had moved through several different rentals, eventually settling in a large Tudor-style home in the Toluca Lake neighborhood. This particular house, close to Warner Brothers in Burbank, made for a practical commute while Davis worked tirelessly to land more substantial roles. These early living arrangements, constantly shifting, hinted at the restlessness that would define much of her life. Indeed, she would end up living in more than 75 homes over the course of her tumultuous career. Her breakthrough arrived with Of Human Bondage, 1934, a film adaptation of W. Somerset Maugham's novel that cast her as the manipulative and unlikable Mildred Rogers. It was an unconventional role for a leading lady of that era, harsh, unsympathetic, and far from glamorous. Yet Davis poured her entire being into the part. The studio wasn't convinced. They practically dismissed the project. When the film finally reached audiences, Davis's searing performance electrified viewers and critics alike. It introduced a new kind of leading lady, one who was unafraid to showcase the darker sides of human nature. Though she was controversially passed over for an Oscar nomination initially, a wave of public outcry elevated her standing in Hollywood. She'd go on to earn 10 Academy Award nominations throughout her career, winning 2, first for Dangerous, 1935, and then for Jezebel, 1938. She was no longer just another actress on the roster. She was Bette Davis, fiery, outspoken, and determined to have the last word. The acknowledgement of her talent came with better roles, and importantly, higher pay. It also allowed her more options on the personal front. By June 1934, she was in a position to move from smaller quarters into a grand Spanish Colonial revival house at 96 North Beverly Drive in Beverly Hills, which she shared with her first husband, Harmon Ham Nelson. Designed by architect John Byers, the residence dated back to 1926 and was originally built for actress Virginia Valley. If you imagine a quintessential California dream home of the 1930s, this is it. Thick white stucco walls with broad arches, earthy wooden beams, and a roof of hand-formed clay tiles that sparkled under the bright Southern California sunshine. Clay tile floors accented the interior spaces, imbuing a sense of rustic charm that felt simultaneously European and uniquely Californian. Davis later wrote that she liked to inject a bit of New England spirit into each of her homes, craving the airy spaciousness that reminded her of the seasons and the tall skies of her upbringing. In the bustling city of Beverly Hills, that was a tall order, yet she managed to do it through an array of personal touches. A canopied bed with subtle nods to colonial design, well-placed antiques that exuded East Coast refinement, and hedges so high they shut out the glare of paparazzi camera flashes. For Davis, privacy wasn't just a convenience. It was a necessity if she wanted to recharge for her demanding schedule. This home became a centerpiece in her life story for a time, a physical reflection of her rise to fame. The music room housed a piano she'd play to release tension. Visitors would sometimes catch her singing show tunes, glass of whiskey in hand, as she unwound after a particularly grueling film shoot. Down the hall was her study, a cozy space lined with scripts marked up in her precise handwriting, personal diaries, and letters from studio executives. Some cordial, others less so, especially when she took them to task over a subpar role. A large fireplace, an almost symbolic hearth for her creative fire, dominated this room. It was here that she pored over new parts, determined to push boundaries. Her stance on roles was unwavering. She didn't want to be typecast, and she'd fight anyone who tried to limit her range. That tenacity led to frequent conflicts with studio heads, who felt they could control every aspect of an actor's career. Davis, however, believed she owed it to herself and to the craft to demand only the best material. Her battles with Warner Brothers executives became legendary. In one infamous case, she sued the studio for better roles and the right to refuse scripts she deemed inferior. The legal struggle was grueling. She lost the lawsuit, but in the court of public opinion, she emerged victorious. It was an incredibly brave move at a time when top-tier actors were typically at the mercy of binding contracts. This feisty attitude only enhanced her stardom. Fans admired her courage, while Hollywood decision-makers realized she was not someone who'd be bullied into submission. Thanks to such fierce negotiations, her filmography reads like a catalog of cinematic milestones. Marked Woman, Dark Victory, Now Voyager, All About Eve, and eventually Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Each performance a master class in the artistry of transformation. She always insisted on infusing her characters with a specific emotional truth, whether she was playing a spoiled heiress, a determined socialite, or an aging starlet teetering on the brink of madness. As her career soared, so did her ability to cultivate a unique personal lifestyle. Davis's love for houses became almost a hobby in itself. She joked about being a nomad who could never quite settle. She once said, "I'm a nester, always out on a limb," a contradiction that perfectly summed up her restless yet comfort-seeking spirit. Over a lifetime, she lived in more than 75 homes, from short-term rentals in West Hollywood to more expansive estates in Beverly Hills. She even spent time in Greta Garbo's former residence, a fleeting arrangement that Davis remembered fondly for its air of Hollywood history, which seemed to breathe through every wall. Each move corresponded to a new phase, a new role, a new marriage, or sometimes a need to escape the stress and scrutiny of the public eye. She was married 4 times in total, each partnership bringing its own complexities. And while the media loved to speculate about her personal life, she kept the real details close, preferring to tackle her challenges privately. One of her most famous and eventually best remembered homes was the Spanish Colonial Revival at 96 North Beverly Drive. With its distinctive architectural flourishes, heavy wooden doors, and meticulous tile work, it served as a stage for some of her highest and lowest moments. She might have raged at a telegram from the studio one minute, then calmly greeted dinner guests the next, whisking them into an ornately furnished dining room to show off her culinary prowess. She adored throwing dinner parties, inviting a mix of famous friends, directors, and sometimes the people who worked behind the scenes, prop masters, stunt doubles, lighting experts, because she felt they rarely got the spotlight they deserved. Those gatherings were legendary. Imagine the hush that would fall over the table when Davis cleared her throat to relay a story, how each anecdote was delivered with a theatrical timing that left her guests either laughing raucously or sitting on the edge of their seats, rapt. This was the magic of Bette Davis, off camera. Always performing, always aware that a good story is what makes a moment memorable. When she decided it was time for a getaway from the frenetic pace of Los Angeles, she looked to the sea. In 1947, Davis purchased a French Normandy-style house perched atop an oceanfront cliff in Laguna Beach. It was a dramatic contrast to her more traditional Spanish colonial homes, yet perfect for someone who thrived on drama. The property is now valued at over $20 million, and it's easy to see why. The courtyard alone, with its manicured landscaping, sets the tone for what feels like a miniature castle overlooking the roaring Pacific. There's a stately circular turret framing a conical roof, evoking medieval romance, and a narrow spiral staircase that descends to a private beach cove. When you stand at that vantage point, you can feel the ocean breezes that must have given Davis a sense of freedom. This was a place where she could escape prying eyes and the endless negotiations of Hollywood. It's said she would lounge on the terrace, a script in her lap, the salty wind teasing her hair, and the waves providing a steady soundtrack that lulled her into creative reverie. Inside, the Laguna Beach home was equally enchanting. The great room was constructed with solid oak floors that somehow felt both regal and welcoming. It was the central hub connecting to multiple living spaces, the family room, a lookout room for ocean gazing, and a dining area that spilled onto a terrace. This open layout meant that even when she had guests, Davis could glide effortlessly between serving cocktails and pointing out the playful sea lions perched on the rocks below. Legend has it, she once hosted a small gathering of co-stars during a break in filming. While the Hollywood norm was to schedule parties with grand fanfare, Davis chose a spontaneous approach. One phone call in the morning, a grocery run for fresh seafood, and by evening she had a relaxed, intimate dinner party where the conversation flowed as freely as the wine. The Laguna property also boasted a separate guest house, ensuring plenty of privacy for visitors. That Davis valued both solitude and social connection in equal measure is evident in the home's design. It was as though she recognized the importance of recharging in a place that captured beauty and tranquility, while also accommodating the old Hollywood custom of entertaining in style. During the era she owned the Laguna Beach house, Davis was as prolific as ever in her film work. She starred in All About Eve, 1950, arguably one of the greatest films of her career and of Hollywood's golden age. The film put a spotlight on aging in an industry obsessed with youth, and Davis delivered a performance so honest and scathing that it remains a benchmark. Off camera, her personal life had the kind of highs and lows you'd expect from a star of her magnitude. She navigated the breakdown of marriages, an often tense relationship with her daughter, and the swirling gossip that followed her at every turn. Yet she never let these personal storms derail her professional stride. She continued working tirelessly, challenging herself with diverse roles, pushing boundaries in an industry that wasn't always open to change. That unstoppable drive was the hallmark of Bette Davis, and one reason she remains a towering figure even decades after her passing. Now, as we come to the end of our tour, it's fascinating to look back at the arc of Bette Davis's life through the houses she inhabited. We started with the humble Victorian in Lowell, Massachusetts, a testament to working-class beginnings. We traveled to the early Hollywood days in modest rentals near Warner Brothers, then on to the grand Spanish Colonial revival that mirrored her rise to stardom and witnessed her domestic joys and sorrows. We glimpsed the Laguna Beach cliffside estate, an extravagant escape that matched her dramatic flair and offered solace from the demands of an illustrious career. And finally, we circled back to the small, unassuming cottage where she found a measure of peace amid the swirling chaos of fame. Each resident spoke to a different facet of Davis's personality: the dreamer, the fighter, the host, the artist, and the restless soul who never quite settled for anything less than an extraordinary life. Before you go, imagine pulling up to that cliffside French Normandy, the ocean wind teasing your hair, the calls of seabirds overhead, and the knowledge that within those walls once roamed a Hollywood legend who made an art form out of living large and loving even larger. Or envision yourself in the grand Beverly Hills mansion, sipping a cocktail while Bette Davis lights up a cigarette, launching into another story from the set of All About Eve. You can almost hear the echoes of her laughter bouncing off the stucco walls, feel the intensity when she locked eyes with a dinner guest, determined to make a point. These mental snapshots remind us that homes aren't merely brick and mortar. They're living archives of the people who shaped them. In Davis's case, each home is a chapter in the most enthralling of autobiographies. If you found our deep dive into Bette Davis's life and her exquisite homes captivating, make sure you show your support. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tap that notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming tours of other Hollywood legends and their remarkable residences. From the luminous hills of Beverly Hills to the tranquil shores of the Pacific, we'll continue unveiling the stories behind the facades, the hidden corners where Hollywood's biggest names sought refuge or basked in their glory. Join us for more captivating glimpses into lives that were anything but ordinary. Thank you for coming along on this journey through the remarkable chapters of Bette Davis's life, and we look forward to welcoming you back for the next adventure.